does translating mean to me? I've never really thought about it, which is odd, given I've spent probably most of my time for the last 3+ years translating. I think I've always viewed it, as most people do, like quite a logical kind of thing, like a procedure with rules and certain boundaries, and that's, I think, why I was originally drawn to Latin, because I liked the puzzle nature of it. But actually this was the first time I've done something a bit more creative with my translation, because you're not thinking about examiners marking it, which is quite nice.
I find it so satisfying picking apart a text, really putting it back together, investigating the intricacies of the grammar, minor kind of gritty details of the language. That to me is endlessly interesting.
Finding the elements of the original text which you think should be saved and perpetuated, but allowing the translator a role of creativity as well as of imitation.
I think translation to me is all about making connections, connections for myself, connecting my past and my present through the languages I've spoken, but also connecting the world, so connecting on a more general plane.
For me, translation is the ultimate exercise in imagination. It's giving your undivided attention to someone's words and thoughts and feelings, and even though their reality isn't your reality, and I think it's impossible to completely know that person, especially with Greek and Latin.
Translation is the process of transferring different concepts and ideas across geographical, historical, linguistic, and cultural boundaries, and is about trying to find a balance between the domestic and the foreign.
It's about open-mindedness, both about ourselves and about the world.
I don't think feeling the presence of the translator and their ideas in the translation is a bad thing at all.
It's a really practical and useful tool that we have available to us that enables us to get as close to the ancient cultures as possible, in my opinion. We are allowed to then understand how the language functioned for the Greeks and the Romans and the people that we study, which is incredibly powerful in the investigation and analysis of the ancient world.
I think translation can be incredibly powerful, as it has been for us, which is why this experience has been so impactful, because it has made us share our own personal and intimate worlds of words, languages, and imagination.
It's refreshing to look at someone else's point of view and someone else's world and to try and immerse yourself in it.
Here are some fragments of these worlds that we'd like to share with you.
So I'm going to read my translation of a poem by Wisława Szymborska, a Polish poet. It's called Museum. There are plates, but there is no appetite. There are wedding rings, yet they've been devoid of shirt love for a good 300 years now. There is a fan, where are the flushed cheeks? There are swords, where is their anger? Neither shall the lute resound at dusking hour. Due to lack of eternity, 10,000 fossilizing objects have been piled up. The moss-invaded keeper sweetly slumbers, resting his moustache on a display case. Metals, terracotta, and winged feathers triumph over time in deadly silence. Only a silly Egyptian pin chuckles. The crown has outdone the head. The hand has granted victory to the glove. The right shoe has prevailed over the foot. What about me, you perhaps think? I'm alive. The struggle with my dress is far from over. How stubborn she is, and how she desires to survive me.
Well, my offering for the translation session was a passage from the very beginning of the Sanskrit epic, the Ramayana. And in classical Indian legend, it is also the very beginning of poetry. It is a story which explains the origin of the epic meter we call the shloka. The story is that the sage Valmiki, who is the putative author of the story of the Ramayana, at least he is the spokesman through which the story is told, saw something happen he saw two birds mating and then a huntsman shooting one of the pair, and the mate then grieving for its killed mate. The word for grief is shoka, and Valmiki was overcome with shoka. So overcome was he that he uttered certain words which naturally gave themselves to poetic rhythm or meter. And so from his state of shoka, of grief, was born the meter of epic poetry and much else in Sanskrit literature, the shloka. Valmiki himself, being aware of this, names the poetic meter forevermore, and his disciple Bharadvaja is delighted to hear this, and therefore, in his delight, he delights his master, his guru. And there, nearby, the sage espied a pair of dallying, sweet-voiced, mating crancha birds. He watched, but then a huntsman, an Ishada, struck down the male in evil-minded malice. And seeing him bloodied, writhing on the ground in pain, his mate cried out a piteous call, whereat the pious sage was filled with pity to see the bird so heartlessly shot down. Decrying that wrong on hearing the grieving hen, thus spake the saint, moved sorely in compassion. Be thou short-lived, Nishada, thou hast killed one of this pair when he was lost in love. Even as he watched and spoke, this thought arose. Deep grieving for this bird, what have I uttered? Reflecting thus, that wise and thoughtful one, the peerless sage, spoke then to his disciple. 4 equal feet, fit both for strings and rhythm, from shoka born, shloka alone be named. When Bharadvaja heard with great delight these peerless words, just as that sage was speaking, the master too was pleased with his disciple.
Moonlight, a translation of Clair de Lune by Paul Verlaine. Your soul is a stage for dreaming, where elegant masks promenade, playing their lutes and dancing, but seeming mournful beneath this joyous facade. Each bacchant sings in a minor key of triumphant love and auspicious life, though they seem unconvinced of their own glee. Their song unites with the very moonlight. Moonlight fair, yet mournful, serene, light which sets the birds dreaming in the trees, the fountains wailing in ecstasy, great slender fountains with marbles between.
My translation is from Boethius's On the Constellation of Philosophy, Book 2, Metrum 3. Lorsque Phébus se mit à faire briller les pôles, dans son char rosâtre, les étoiles jouent leur rôle. Face à l'assaut de tous ces rayons éclatants, elles pâlissent, leur visage, hébété, ternissantes. Quand le verger de roses printanières rugit, le souffle tiède de zéphyr les assouvit. Mais dans un soudain coup de brumeux vent austral, les roses s'échapperaient, recollantes leurs pétales, laissant seulement les étrices d'épines dans leur sillage. Sous un ciel calme et serein, la mer lui fort. Ses ondes immobiles clapotent contre les bords. Souvent, mais aussi souvent, l'aquilon remue. Les vagues déclenchent des tempêtes partout. Donc si la forme du monde se bouleverse constamment, si elle change ses vicissitudes, jamais permanentes, alors fiez-vous à votre destin, ô homme, alors fiez-vous à la bonté qui t'attend. Sortant, il est figé dans la loi transcendante, que rien que l'on crée peut durer longtemps.
I kind of want to confess that before the St. Anne's lockdown muses came calling, I'd never actually dared to write poetry of any sort. And these are my first efforts in the iambic pentameter, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to try them out. I chose this passage because it was a time when I was a long way away from my own father, aged 84, isolated and so hard at work in his own garden that scarcely a weed remained for him to uproot. I also love it because of the way in which, as Odysseus lays down his arms, and with it his martial personality, nevertheless, Homer uses a lot of very warlike language in order to bring home to us the embattled situation of Laertes, his father. He spoke, and to the men his armour gave. Homeward they hastened then to make their way. Yet he drew near the garden full of fruit, and went into the orchard spreading round. No steward there he found, nor men, nor sons, all gone to gather stones, ramparts for the vines. And as they marched, the old man led the way. But lonely in the well-built garden worked his aged father, digging in a plant. Dust-covered was the tunic that he wore, its tears all darned, its sorry state displayed. And patched-up leggings on his shins he'd tied, gloves on his hands, greave and gauntlet to avert the grievous wounds inflicted by the thorns. Worn out by age, great sorrow in his heart, his head he covered with a goatskin helm, it butt-sharpened the arrows of the sun. Beneath the stately pear tree standing by, the godlike hero who had borne so much looked on and felt the tears stream down his face.
I sort of feel like this is probably the best translation I've produced in terms of actually capturing the feeling, because I've always sort of thought you can't really understand what's being said in translation, at least in my translations, but I feel like this maybe got a bit closer to capturing what Ovid was on about, although capturing what Ovid's on about is always a bit tricky. But I enjoyed it. I'm really glad I did it. 3 times I reached the door, 3 times I failed, called back, my slow feet pitying my soul. Goodbye, I often said, yet stayed to speak and left as if I'd said my last farewell. Repeated often my commands, deceived and cast my gaze upon the ones I loved. I asked, why rush? You know to where you must go, must leave home. Delay is only just. In life, no more allowed to see my wife, my home, its sweet familiar floors, walls, doors, those friends I love in ways a brother would, bound to my heart by epic devotion. So let me hold you whilst I may. I fear I shan't again. This time is all I have. Without delay I left, my speech as yet unfinished, hugged once more my nearest loves.
I'm going to translate a few lines from Scene 1 of Goethe's Faust. This is Faust speaking, and he is describing the art of persuasion and how to be successful in it. If you don't feel it, if it doesn't rise from the soul and with innate power compel the hearts of the listeners, you will never attain it. Just sit there forever, glue together, brew a ragout from another's scraps, and blow the wretched flames from your little heap of ashes. Take the wonder of children and apes if it remains to your taste, but from heart to heart, you will never achieve it, if from the heart it doesn't come.
I decided to translate Explico algunas cosas by Pablo Neruda because not only has it always been one of my favourite poems, but it really poignantly describes the imposition of a shocking and tragic new normal upon the city of Madrid when Neruda was living at the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War, and how this change really jars with a beautiful place in the poet's memory. I'm from Wales, and the first term that comes to mind in describing the sensation throughout the poem is hiraeth, which is considered untranslatable, but a good approximation is the longing for a homeland that is past. Just before I came to Oxford, I actually used to live in Madrid. I was there studying to attain a diploma of Spanish as a second language, but the city really became like my second home, and it's just really difficult to reconcile what I consider it to be like, and will probably always consider it to be like, with somewhere which, like everywhere else, is now completely restructured by tragedy and is completely unreachable for the foreseeable future. You'll ask, and where then are the lilacs and the poppy-coated metaphysics and the rain which used to drill its words till it brimmed with birds and apertures? I will tell you everything I know. I lived in a quarter of Madrid with bells and trees and clock towers. From there you could look out upon the dry face of Castile like an ocean of leather. My house was called the House of Flowers because geraniums spilled from every corner. It was a beautiful house with dogs and children. Remember Raul? Rafael, do you remember? Federico, do you remember there below the ground? Do you remember my house and its balconies where the June light drowned flowers in your mouth? Brother, my brother, everything was made of voices, the salt from supermarkets, bread rising in heaps, food stalls throughout my neighbourhood, Argüelles, with that statue like a dim inkwell there between the fresh-caught hake. Spoons swam with olive oil. A great whip of feet and hands filled the streets and divvied into meters, litres, the sharp measure of life. The salted fish, the texture of roofs under that cold sunlight in which the weather vane tires, the delirious fine marble of potatoes, tomatoes brimming up to the horizon. And one day, everything was burning. And one day, bonfires sprang from the earth, consuming beings. And from then on, flames, gunpowder from then on, and from then on, blood.
As the moon and the Pleiades set, it is midnight. The hour draws near, and I sleep alone.
I'm going to translate a poem by Cesare Pavese, Mattino, Morning. The half-closed window holds a face on the sea field. Its wild hair accompanies the gentle rhythm of the sea. There are no memories to this face, only a fleeting shadow, like that of a cloud. The shadow is moist and sweet, like the sand of an untouched hollow under the dusk sun. There are no memories, only a whisper, the voice of the sea now made memory. At dusk, the soft water of dawn, drunken with light, brightens up the face. Every day is a timeless miracle under the sun. The salty light drenches it, along with the flavour of living seafood. There are no memories to this face. There are no words that can hold it, nor liken it to past things. Yesterday, it disappeared from that small window, like it will in a second, with no sadness, nor human words, from the sea field.